how this could help anticipate, how this could be seen as a deal breaker, and how could it anticipate fall down of shares or crisis?
No, absolutely. So two very specific examples, and they are very top of the news. So FTX, the crypto exchange that is now crumbling, filing for bankruptcy. We actually saw in our tool the growth of negative sentiment picking up very severely 3 weeks before the news broke out. So you can clearly see in one of the data, and we published a study on LinkedIn about that. We can see the sentiment really sort of getting more and more negative as the news are breaking down about bankruptcy. So that really helps you sort of stay on top of trends and predict any movements. Another one is Téléperformance, which is sort of a back office provider that is listed in the Paris stock market. They had actually a very sort of obscure probe into their Colombian subsidiary that was very, very tame in the news, but it's actually a TikTok documentary that went out by workers in Colombia, publishing about like $10 working days, very violent working conditions. And that was a month before the news broke out and the stock price pummeled like 30%. And that news was identified, that TikTok documentary was identified by our tool 3 weeks in advance. So that's sort of the examples of how you can, by monitoring your portfolios in that fashion, stay ahead of the trend.
Actually, I think just on a similar example, but on a more sort of uplifting way of using it, because there is so much data out there now. The question is, you can also go very surgical. And just to give an example of when we used Alejandro's company recently, this was vendor due diligence. So we were getting ready to sell a business that we owned, which is in the vaccine cold chain. And we bought it well before COVID. And of course, the vaccine cold chain until COVID had primarily been used to get vaccines to difficult parts of the world, to children that live in sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Latin America, and so on. And one of the key drivers of demand for the vaccine cold chain, of course, is not the needs of the children, because those are massive. It's the amount of money that donors and donor governments are prepared to give. And so that sentiment about how much money, how much funding to give, is an important predictor of the market size for the vaccine cold chain. Now, of course, when COVID hit, demand for vaccine cold chain equipment skyrocketed. And as vendors of this company, we had to convince the buyer that this wasn't a blip, that this was actually a trend that was going to continue to build. And the way we did it was through vendor due diligence, using Alejandro's firm, where we could start to show, pre-COVID, the amount of discussion about the vaccine cold chain, almost nothing. It was like a problem that was a long way away, didn't really affect people. And we could then show the build-up of all the articles that were coming out, academic research, government statements, statements of funding, and we could show, look, the world has really changed, and therefore, the strong assertion that we could make with this data was, this isn't a blip. You don't have to worry about overpaying, based on 2021 earnings. This is going to continue right into the future. And that, I would say, that made a very material difference to our ability to sell that company at the value we did. So I'm very grateful to SESAMm for that.
Thank you.